Today I'm having a casual chat with one of my dear friends and someone I admire so very much, but also an amazing person and a magician. She has such a wealth of knowledge to share, and I am so excited for this chat today. So we will be discussing a myriad of things, from the 4 powers of the Sphinx and what they mean for someone who's interested in doing magic. We will also be talking about Golden Dawn and some of the things we wish we knew before joining various magical communities. So I'm hoping to speak to women in particular interested in getting into ceremonial magic, but a lot of what we have to say will be for everyone. So please join us on this fantastic conversation, this casual chat today. And also, for those of you who submitted questions over Discord, we will be getting into those as well. So, Lauren, could you please introduce yourself and share some of your magical background and perhaps some projects you're excited to be working on now?
Yeah, so I'm Lauren Gardner. Professionally, I'm a therapist in private practice in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I've been, a long-time student of Golden Dawn, of ceremonial magic, Thelema, and all kinds of associated things like astrology, alchemy, Kabbalah. Too many different associated topics to name. So in terms of current projects, right now I'm just kind of getting out of the sort of rush of ThelemaCon. We had a very successful ThelemaCon about a month ago, and Lynn was also there.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, so we had a great event, and lots of people coming out, participating. We tried to really focus on kind of, creating a really fun and safe social space for everybody. So it was just really great to be able to meet everyone and talk and just be in the swirl of new ideas and new energy. So
yeah, definitely. And I just want to say about ThelemaCon, it was an incredible event, and I loved volunteering for it and meeting everyone. And I the goal of creating a safe social space was achieved. It was a fantastic event, and it was big enough that there was such a great variety of ideas and people sharing different perspectives, but it was small enough that I felt like we could really connect and meet people and socialize. So thank you for that. It was so great.
And thank you and Richard for hosting one of the hosted dinners too, because it's really, something we wanted to do was to create like a space where speakers could host a dinner and have people that were at the conference come out to dinner so they get to know each other, talk about topics that we're interested, spend a little bit of extra time with a speaker and with each other. So it was really great to be able to see how everyone took to that, and it just really brought people together. So we've had people that came to every ThelemaCon now. So there's sort of people who have a streak going. So, those are every 2 years, by the way. So it'll be 2026 before we're on that again. So just being able to decompress a bit has been pretty important. It's complicated dealing with a hotel and logistics and, not only speaking, but the administrative side is pretty complex, as you might imagine. So.
Yeah, so, we were just having a conversation off camera about how the fun part of what we do is the magic and the people and the talks and the learning and all of that, but there's a huge component that I think a lot of people don't see, the paperwork. So the paperwork, the administration, the executive sort of skills there are all coming out, and thank you for that hard work behind the scenes that you do.
Thank you, because you were involved in it too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's that meme where it's like, okay, this is what my friends think I do, and like what my family thinks I do, and what society thinks I do, and what I think I do, and it's like all these glamorous kinds of things. And like what I actually do, it's like spreadsheets and email and like, several different email accounts, and it's a lot. The administrative piece is a lot, but it's also important. And what helps me kind of deal with the overwhelm sometimes of managing all that is like, all right, it's important, it matters. And this would not be, a thing we could all do without really being able to be organized.
Sure, absolutely. So I want to reach across you and grab this mouse. So I have a list of topics to go down, but
it's cool to be able to see them too, by the way. I'm not sure all your guests get to see the questions.
No, so y'all don't see the questions that I put together based on y'all's Discord questions and some other stuff, some thoughts. But one thing I want to talk about before we get going is someone asked, where was the inspiration for making this video together? And honestly, well, first of all, I've just been inspired by you as a person in general for so long. And I was like, oh my God, I'd love to bring some of that light and some of that perspective to my YouTube channel. But last convention, which is a private conference known as NOTOCON, it's the OTO's national conference every 2 years. You gave a talk on the 4 powers of the Sphinx, and I would love to bring some of that discussion here.
Yeah.
So could you talk about what are the 4 powers of the Sphinx and how are they relevant to us as magicians, basically?
Yeah, so the first place that I'm aware of them being mentioned is in Fulcanelli about the powers of the cathedrals, the mysteries of the cathedrals. I forget the title of the book, but it's been translated. But they're mostly unpacked in Eliphas Levi, and then later on you'll see them in Crowley, and you'll see them in a number of different places kind of sprinkled around. So they're in Latin, but the English translations are to know, to dare, to will, and to keep silent. So sometimes you'll see them in a separate order: to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. And you'll also have the Latin translations of those as well.
Awesome. And so those 4 powers also have elemental attributions or associations. So we have air, fire, water, and earth. And for someone who's a practitioner, how can they make use of this?
Well, they're useful for anything you might do in your practical life. They're useful for anything you might actually want to try to accomplish. So, I think if you can use any sort of example of something you're trying to accomplish, when I've written about these before, I'd like to compare it to like a backpacking trip. So like, I love backpacking. I love going out and spending a few days out on the Appalachian Trail. It's something that really helps me to kind of recenter and reorient around myself. But knowledge is like, okay, knowing what your terrain is going to be like. What kind of terrain am I going to be dealing with? Where am I going to be camping? Like, just basically having enough information about what you're getting into in order to be able to plan. When we're talking about will, right, because I'm looking at the way you've laid them out here on the screen, will is your persistence. So if you're going to be doing 10 miles in a day, and some people will do 20 plus, I'm not that young anymore, but, really being able to kind of have the endurance to be able to go mile after mile after mile after mile when the going gets tough, or when you're going up a steep hill, or, even when, you're having some issues and you need to just kind of push through, that's where the will comes in. Courage is, okay, well, do you have the willingness to kind of do something that has some implicit danger in it? Anything that we do that might be worth doing has a certain amount of implicit danger in it. So that one I think is most important really for us as a society at large, because, all right, to be able to go out into the wilderness by yourself takes a certain amount of courage, but that involves calculating out the risk first. And then silence is, all right, you want to be sure that people who care about you and love you know where you're going.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to post it on Instagram and social media of like, I'm going to be camping here. I'm going to be camping at this particular place, this particular time, right by this road. Let me tell everybody all over the world where I'm going to be. Like, that's kind of a bad plan. And also you kind of don't want to leave all your food lying out, just so animals to be able to get to. You want to be able to like use your bear can or hang up your food, like leave no trace, right? So that's the principle of silence. So that's an example I like to use of how those 4 powers are applied to that particular activity. Anything we do would have a similar kind of breakdown.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's applicable to everyone. Like, and it comes back to this idea.
These are so practical.
Yeah, that really is. And I love the comment you made about the bear can. I never would have thought about that as a part of being silent, but it absolutely is.
Silence is also about not taking up space.
Sure.
And a lot of times for us, like, psychologically, emotionally, it's like, especially for women, it's how do we take up space? How do we learn to take up space? But also you got to know when to be able to not outshine somebody else.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I think that sometimes you can shine too brightly and mess up the dynamic of a group or like context you're in. So for sure.
Yeah. In the I Ching, this is called dimming the brightness.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. So I actually got a bunch of questions from the Hermetic House of Life Discord server. So shout out to you all. Thank you for having me on that Discord server and also giving me some questions to ask today. You all did not have the context of who I was meeting with or what we were talking about really, but you gave me some really good questions on this topic. So one person asked, I'd be curious to hear her thoughts on the fourth power to keep silent and the tensions around it in exactly this context. On the one hand, there's value in representation of diverse voices and the potential to make connections with new and interesting people, while on the other hand, there can be significant disadvantages to visibility, especially for women on the internet. So what is your sort of take or perspective on that?
Well, the fourth power of the Sphinx does not mean tone yourself down. If you're a woman who needs to be heard and you have a valid point and something important to say, this is not for you. You know, like the first power of the Sphinx is knowledge. So you need to know when it's time to be silent and when it's time to speak up.
Yeah.
And once you've spoken up and you've gotten your voice heard, then it's time to fall back and listen to others. So I think right now for women, it's important to speak up and make ourselves visible as important members of this community in our own right. Like, I hate to even say it because for me, when I first started out, I wasn't really aware of my gender being a thing in this community. I mean, for me, it was early on. You know, I started out in this community as a teenager, and so it was all message boards. You didn't have your face behind it. You didn't have your body behind it.
Same here,
so you could just kind of blend. We talked about this before.
Yes, we did.
Like you could just kind of blend in, and it was like you had your, you know, your little screen name, and your avatar was just like some random clip art or something. Like, it wasn't a thing, and now it's more like your gender is becoming this politicized kind of thing, and it's like, it's not necessary. And but a lot of times the fact that we're so aware of it puts us in this position of like a stereotype threat. You know, the stereotype threat in psychology is the more aware you are of being a part of a marginalized group, the more you tend to act out your own marginalization in this way that's really problematic. So being silent might not really be for us as women right now. That might be more a power that the men need to start exercising a bit.
Sure. Wow, you touched on some amazing points that I'm so glad you brought up. That was gold there. And because one of the things I miss is the time. Well, I shouldn't say miss. I should say I'm nostalgic about the time before I put my face on the internet when I was But yeah, I mean, there was those times in the old forums, you know, back in 2005, 2006, where like, you know, you had some random Latin phrase as your username and you were just like a person.
Yeah.
And like, I felt like I could really, because I come from the perspective of like getting really into philosophy before discovering Crowley and the occult. And then like, once I did, it was just like, woo, this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
But I really miss my words being taken for what they were and not attached to this identity. But now that I am existing, I do realize there is a very important space to exist fully as myself. And yes, that's going to come with the baggage people project onto me when they see me and they jump to conclusions, and that's a problem. But I continue to put my face out there and my voice out there attached to my identity and not just a disembodied profile, because I feel like it's an invitation to the right people.
Well, I mean, you're a badass for cutting that way
Thank
forward. You know, and like, I mean, sometimes you just kind of have to show up and be like, look, this is who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. You get over it. Here's what I have to say. And that clears the way for other people.
Exactly. Because I do genuinely believe, whether your path is Golden Dawn, Thelema, whatever you're doing, the occult in general,
right?
You know, this is a space that has real value for all people. This isn't just about men.
It has to be. It really, if you look at it more deeply, it always kind of has been.
And it saddens me. I feel like throughout history, with the devaluation of certain voices, certain marginalized voices, but of women's voices and contributions, and I've covered this so many times, I'm not going to get fully into that topic, but you know, we are losing an incredibly valuable resource and perspective on what it means to be human in this song and dance. If we are supposed individuals seeking knowledge, seeking enlightenment, seeking understanding reality, that has to include that has to include different human perspectives, including people who are a different gender than you, a different sexuality than you. I mean, this is all part of the tapestry of what it means to be human. And we are supposedly supposed to be engaging with that. And if we are, that it means including diverse voices. Because for me, it helps me learn new things. It helps me engage more deeply.
Diverse voices is not just women. It's
Exactly.
like people of all genders. It's people of various different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And
100%.
that's where that fourth power of the Sphinx comes in, where you want to learn the experience of someone really different. You want to learn something you don't know already. You got to shut up and listen.
Yes.
And that's the fourth power of the Sphinx. Sometimes it's just shut up and listen.
That's great. That's a great way to look at it. Thank you for that.
I mean, Takare doesn't, always convey that same sense, but each of these are so multidimensional.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm not going to learn something from somebody else if I'm over here trying to, tell them about my favorite, Kabbalistic associations, so let me just go shut up and listen. Okay, let's talk about something different. And, I can be guilty of that too. Just get in our own sort of bailiwick and run with it, so...
Yeah, and I do want to say too, there is some value in indulging those sort of niche, super narrow interests. I think you can end up in interesting places, but I love this conversation around knowing when it's time to shut up and listen, because there's you get so much value from that.
Right, but if you can get through the first three powers first,
yes,
then you'll have a pretty good sense of when it's time for you to shut up and listen and learn something. And if you're not able to do that, you got something wrong with the first three. But trying to convince someone of that is a losing game, as I've learned, unfortunately. So.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That sounds like a story, but
well, there's many stories there, and I'm sure you have many stories yourself along those lines. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I really think as women, we've got to be careful about the messages we picked up and learned that our voices don't matter, or that, just listen to the men, defer to the men, they know what they're talking about. And I have this internalized sexism too.
Sure.
That's the shadow work in it, is my own sort of internalized misogyny that I'm still working to unpack. And sometimes I don't know how much I know about something until I hear someone else saying it, and I go to a workshop on something like pranayama, and I'm like, I already knew all this. All this. Am I allowed to swear on this channel?
Yeah, go for it. I'll bleep it out, but yeah, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I already knew all this, So
yeah,
there's that. Yeah.
Well, and that was my whole thing, is I thought I didn't have anything to contribute, and a lot of people do have the opinion that's like, oh, Lynn, hasn't dotted the T's and crossed the I's in terms of what I feel like is a really knowledgeable ipsissimus to have an opinion on anything. But I realized me being a person was a necessary thing out there in the universe that people needed to see and experience outside of myself. So this is more about a service to the wider community, and realizing this had to happen. And with my various skill sets, or experiences rather, if you could call it that, I was like, all right,
both really.
Yeah. I was like, it's time. I need to step up. I need to have the courage. I need to have the courage to put myself out there. Is it scary? Yes. Is it necessary? Also, yes. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the path I've been on.
Mm-hmm. And is it a lot of hard work?
Yeah, it is.
So, you put the elemental correspondences out here for the four powers of the Sphinx, but I think of them as being much more closely tied to the Cherubic zodiac signs. So, knowing is like Aquarius. Knowledge, it's air. Will is like Taurus. You're being stubborn, you're working hard, you're spending hours going and editing these videos, addressing comments, going in constantly, every single day, hours and hours and hours, putting in that hard work, that discipline, right? It's more about Taurus than about Earth.
True.
And when you're talking about courage, all right, that's Leo. Sometimes you have to be, and you can bleep me out again for that, but you have to be a lion or a lioness, and just to be able to step across that threshold into what is a risky choice, but is necessary, that at that point is necessary for you to accomplish your true will. And then when all that's done, how do you not sort of take that courage and push it to the point of like, causing problems because you need extra attention and just kind of
causing problems.
causing problems because your need for attention is never satisfied.
Exactly.
And if that once that can actually be satisfied, then you can kind of be able to be silent and be like that eagle, that Scorpio transmuted up into the eagle and just kind of soar over, and then you're in this really great blissful place where you don't have to say anything anymore.
Yeah.
And that feels really good.
Yeah, that's a great place to be.
It's not about being silent. It's about sort of being in that bliss, I mean, I've seen Phyllis Sackler sort of translate this one as soaring subtlety, which I absolutely love.
I love that.
I love it, yeah.
That's fantastic. And for me, like, in terms of social media and being present, keeping silent takes, I guess currently right now in my work, yes, I am on social media. Yes, I do produce things, but I am not sharing my life on there. I am on there sharing my interests in a very narrow part of my life and who I am. You all do not see most of my life very intentionally, because I feel like I'm constantly at war with the social media and the algorithms and that sort of all of that attention that comes with that, because I'm quite introverted as a person, and I like my privacy. I like my cozy nights in. I am not, really, I don't crave that kind of attention. I view it as a necessary thing, and I do that, and I fulfill that, and I very intentionally do it. But when it's time to unplug, I relish the times I just, I'm like, hey guys, I'm not going to be on the internet, like.
It's having good boundaries.
Exactly.
It's really, one other layer of it is being able to say, all right, like, here's where my availability stops.
Yes.
And I think that's especially true because we're kind of connected all the time, I mean, in ways that can sometimes be really, like, overwhelming and damaging to our ability to pay attention, stay focused, and live our lives.
Absolutely. So, I have another question. This one also comes from the same Discord server. And this is a question for you, which is, how did you get into the Golden Dawn as far as having a reference or seeking it out by yourself? And what were your initial feelings before joining? Was there any hesitation based on you being a woman? Or maybe you were inspired by the women you knew of in the Golden Dawn. So what does that kind of look like for you?
It's such an interesting question because in a weird way, maybe there's some karmic link for me. I've always been interested in the Golden Dawn.
That's awesome.
I started out as a teenager with like Wicca, witchcraft, paganism, just because that's what I could get access to. And I remember, like, literally before I could drive, being dropped off at the mall and going to a Borders store, and I was looking at all the witchcraft books, and this is back when we had Borders, back when we had bookstores, that actually, like, were kind of, big box bookstores that would be in the mall. And, like, finding, the Regarded Golden Dawn book, finding some of the other things that were coming out at that point, through the Ciceros and all that, and really sort of looking at it and being like, wow, like, I don't understand any of this. And feeling so compelled by that, because when I'm flipping through the witchcraft books, I'm like, okay, I already know this. Like, casting a circle, okay, like, this is, like, familiar to me from stuff I could find on the internet or in, like, basic Scott Cunningham kind of books that I already had. But when I got the Golden Dawn book and opened it up, even in the bookstore, I was like, I don't understand any of this, but like, this is the kind of book I want to like buy and like grow into. And I think I was 16.
That's amazing. I love that.
I know it was before I was able to drive, because I remember being dropped off at the mall and like, this is what I spent my time doing at the mall. And like, hid it in like a bag, and like brought it home and, I joined my first Golden Dawn temple when I was 21, something like that. I was a junior in college. So, I mean, I didn't find anything for a long time because there wasn't anything around. And then I found out through word of mouth by somebody who was in my Gnosticism class at UNC Chapel Hill, just randomly, synchronistically, like, hey, there's this Golden Dawn temple. And I just like, what? Okay, like, sign me up, I've been ready for years, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess synchronicities kind of bring us all kinds of places. So,
there was no hesitation based on being a woman. I'm looking at the question on the screen, and it wasn't so much of a thing for me. It was more like I had always been interested in it. I'd always been hungry for it, and like most of the people in the temple were men. Okay, fine. You know,
Yeah.
but the Hierophant at that initial was a woman. So, you know, they left soon after, but like, okay. So to me, it wasn't even really a thing. There were, you know, there were things later on, but
Yeah.
to me, it's like, I wasn't going to let that stop me. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I knew it was important. I was going to do it, and I'm stubborn enough and determined enough that I wasn't going to let that be an issue. So
Yeah, I actually felt the same. I mean, I remember when I first became interested in like the OTO and stuff, one of the things I was told was there's no women in it. And I said, I mean, this was like around 2006, 2007 era. So I don't know what the OTO landscape looked like back then, but I mean, I was just not in a place where I wanted to join anything personally. It's been a long journey for me to join anything.
I hear that, yeah.
But yeah, there was like, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of dudes and their wives that are only kind of interested in how untrue that is. It is not true, especially in today's world where a lot of our orders and organizations have women in places of power, and there's just a great diversity in a lot of our groups. So
I think that's true of any group that's going to have a long enough history, that the people that are sort of more known and more prominent have been men, because it's just a lot easier to have space in your life as a woman to do this kind of stuff now than it used to be. You know, I mean, you can kind of choose what you want your family to look like. It's, you know, it's just easier in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, and so I guess that sort of brings up the question too. What are some things you wish you knew before getting into all of this, or before initiating? I don't know.
Well, I guess it depends on what point of my life, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're gonna look at like, what do I wish I knew when I was 16? Like, I mean, that's just like, all right. Literally, when I was 16, I thought I already knew everything that I needed to know, except it was in this like magical black brick book that was just so compelling to me, you know. So I almost don't really know where to go with that. It's like, okay, am I speaking to my 16-year-old self? Am I speaking to my 26-year-old self?
Let's speak to our 26-year-old selves.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what do I wish I knew? It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful.
Which really seems like overly simple, but when I was 26, I was not convinced it was gonna be okay. I was like super scared, you know, in terms of like my future and like trying to build a career for myself and trying to like make my relationship work, and I just needed to know things would be okay. And I didn't have any way of knowing that for sure at that point in life. But, you know, like when I think about my relationship now to my inner, not my inner child, but my inner 26-year-old child, is like, things will be okay.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think I needed to know something like that in my mid-20s as well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and also, like, if somebody tells you, I know you better than you know yourself, they're full of bull. You should get away from them pretty quickly.
Yes.
Especially if it's a man who's your spiritual teacher. So. You know.
What?
So, I mean, that might be like the one more concrete piece of spiritual advice that I would give myself, but. You know, I mean,
Isn't
I
this
didn't need
this
to,
is
'cause
the
I figured it out, right?
Yeah, and that is such a true piece of advice that I wish I could beam to myself throughout my life, but also other people who need to hear it. It's that, like, if someone randomly shows up in your life and is like, I know you better than you know yourself, and they just start telling you about yourself, and a part of you is like, you don't even know me, that's not true, but they just kind of steamroll you and be like, oh, this is about you and you need to do this, and get away from that person.
Well, even if they don't steamroll you, I mean, this can take much more subtle forms.
Sure.
And I remember it was just mind-blowing to me. I was 26. I was starting to learn about, you know, like counseling and just sort of like, you know, even like basic I statements of like, oh, you can say, I feel this. And nobody can argue with you because it's your own inner experience. But then when I say, I feel this, and you literally get, no, you don't. I know you better than you know. Like, that's like, that doesn't fly. Even if they know you pretty well, even if they've been reading your diaries for years, they're not going to know you better than you know yourself.
100%. Yeah.
You know, and like, it's a rude awakening, but we learn what we got to learn, sometimes the easy way, sometimes the harder way.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people do put themselves in positions or end up in positions of power or end up in groups and then just take a role of like dogmatically trying to control people in a way that's unhealthy.
And I think if we can look at how that takes more subtle forms, okay, I think it's pretty easy for most of us out here to kind of recognize, all right, somebody is being overly controlling, you know, like being in this sort of cult mentality, right? Like that's something we got a nose for.
Yeah.
What we might not have a radar for is somebody who genuinely has good intentions, but does not understand the importance of autonomy or the importance of letting people figure shit for their own selves.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Wonderful.
You might have to bleep out a lot of things I've been saying.
No worries,
but,
no worries.
You know, I feel relaxed and happy, so
Yes,
I just speak the way I normally do. So.
Yeah, this is wonderful advice.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing some advice. And so to sort of wrap this up, if people are interested in connecting with you or joining an order or like any of that stuff, feel free to plug as thou wilt.
Well, I mean, I've had really great experiences with Temple of the Silver Star. So a lot of people don't realize that Temple of the Silver Star really is a Golden Dawn patterned order. So bear that in mind. If you're looking for a Golden Dawn patterned order, check out Temple of the Silver Star. Fantastic, really solid curriculum, great people. Very organized, professional. You know, I've had wonderful experiences there and a lot of experience in sort of traditional non-Thelemic Golden Dawn stuff even before I joined. Even with that background, I've learned a whole lot. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. And those links will be down below for people who are interested in that and finding an organization and connecting perhaps with Thelemic Golden Dawn. I mean, that's a beautiful opportunity and organization run by some amazing people. And yeah, all those links will be down below if you're interested in that. And anything else you would like to leave our viewers and listeners with today?
Well, I can't really think of much of anything. I'm sure there's a zillion other things that we talked about earlier that are sort of relevant here, but I think that's about it. I mean, Temple of the Silver Star really is a great way to go, and I think Golden Dawn really does work better once you put some thelemic juice in that particular machine. So for me, it was just unbelievable having a chance to be able to say, like, this actually works as a thelemic system, like better than I've seen it ever work. So I'm sure a lot of folks in the Golden Dawn world, traditional Golden Dawn world, don't consider anything that's thelemic to really be real Golden Dawn, and that's what I remember from being deeply involved in that community too. So works, if it works, it works. Another thing that I do want to plug is there's a Hermetic tablet journal that's edited by Nick Farrell. So I've got an article in that's coming out sometime in the next few months, I believe. But just search for Hermetic tablet. It's self-published, I think, by Nick Farrell, and there's a lot of great essays in there too.
That's awesome.
It's based on my talk from ThelemaCon.
Oh, that's so exciting. I'm excited to check that out as well. Great to hear that coming out.
And a lot of those are from the traditional Golden Dawn world too. So there's a lot of cross-pollination. Yeah, there is. And it's a very small community too,
It's
true,
And the one thing I want to talk about, just sort of as a closing topic, is the value of community and organizations. Because I think a lot of people are approaching this from a solo perspective, which is valid. However, I think we lose sight, especially in ceremonial magic, of how many beautiful gifts that can come from not only a structured organization to guide you on your path, but also that community. So what extra value have you found that may not be as obvious to people from the outside?
Well, community and organizations are really different.
Sure,
we have a really interesting world right now where in the Thelemic universe you can be a member of multiple organizations or orders or zero. But Thelemic community is bigger than that. So that just kind of means, being able to kind of recognize, all right, in what ways is being a part of any of these organizations serving me or not, and being conscious and intentional about that.
Very true.
So, when we talk about Thelemic community, to me, it feels important that it's bigger than any particular order. And what I love about what we have in, the Raleigh-Durham area right now, magically, is like, okay, we got OTO, we got Temple of the Silver Star, we've got all kinds of other magical and Wiccan groups, we got meetups. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and that's a great thing because, for instance, Temple of the Silver Star requires a lot of work. Like, people often don't really realize that it's not kind of like OTO where you can kind of come in and sort of like, it can be mainly a social thing. Like Temple of Silver Star requires a lot of kind of working through these grades and these degrees. It's a Golden Dawn patterned order. You got things to memorize, you got assignments to turn in. So that's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah, but it could be really helpful for people looking for that extra structure, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And, it's a great chance to get some experience in ritual, too. So, and you also don't know what's really for you till you taste it, try it
exactly.
out. So.
That's a really good point, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I think we had some fantastic advice and perspective for people.
It's totally been a treat. Yeah, I'm glad we could kind of like not devolve into hysterical laughter, which is something that happened as we were talking leading up to this.
Yeah,
we kept it together. We did it.
Yeah, there's a thing that happens sometimes when we get together. Things sort of devolve into absurdity. But in a good way.
That's not a bad energy.
It's a great energy.
Only appropriate in certain circumstances.
Absolutely. That's a rare energy that has to exist off the internet. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for all of our viewers and listeners. As always, I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you. Thanks, everyone.